Hello, horror fans. It is I, the Harbinger. Actually, it's just me, Danny, from the Lasercast, and I'm here to talk about a new horror film that I just saw called The Harbinger. This movie is available to rent and buy right now on VOD. You can see it right there behind me. It's available on Vudu right now, and I got a chance to watch this movie a few days early, and let me tell you, 2022 just keeps getting better and better when it comes to horror movies. Every time I think I've seen enough horror movies to put in my top 10 list, I get to see another movie like this where I'm like, okay, I might have to rethink the list. This movie is done by Andy Mitton. Andy Mitton did a really cool sub 80-minute movie called The Witch in the Window a few years ago. Genuinely a really fun little movie if you get a chance to see that. He also did Yellow Brick Road, which came out a little while ago, and I heard really good things. And based on this and The Witch in the Window, which I've seen and I didn't even realize he had directed, I'm going to seek Yellow Brick Road out because I'm a big fan of this guy, Andy Mitton. This movie takes place in and is filmed mostly in Binghamton, New York, which I have a special appreciation for. I went to college in Binghamton, and I lived in the city of Binghamton and the neighboring town of Johnson City for 2 years. I went to college there for 4, but I lived in the city and the neighboring town for 2 years. There's a scene in this movie that drives past the cemetery that I'm pretty sure is the cemetery I lived literally across the street from my senior year in college, which I'd love to talk to the writer-director, Andy Mitton, and find out if that was the cemetery, and to find out if he's from Binghamton and what made him shoot there, because it's not a town that I think of when I think of, like, that's a cool place to go and do, location shooting for a horror film. This movie, I got a screener for this movie with the idea that this was a really, well-received horror film, but I knew nothing about it going in. And knowing nothing about this movie, the best thing I can say is it feels like The Omen by way of Nightmare on Elm Street with a touch of Malignant almost to it. There's the Harbinger in this movie, and the reason that I started the video wearing my plague mask, my plague doctor mask, I bought that mask as part of my Halloween costume, my sadly appropriate Halloween costume in 2020. This movie was obviously made during the pandemic, and the plot of the movie is Monique lives with she's currently living with her brother and father in Binghamton, and they are very super duper careful, getting like home delivery of groceries, being very careful when they go out. Monique gets a call. Monique is played by Gabby Beans, by the way, which is an adorable name. Gabby Beans. I mean, my goodness. I've not seen her or the other lead actress, Emily Davis, in anything. Both of them knocked it out of the park in this film. Monique gets a call from her old friend Mavis, who we find out through kind of context of the movie. Mavis saved Monique in a way. You kind of get the feeling that Monique might have been suicidal and that Mavis kind of brought her back from the edge. Mavis, we find out at the beginning of this movie, is basically living alone. She's in a complete panic state. She wakes herself up by, like, inducing bodily harm. She, like, digs into her skin until she bleeds. Her neighbors are concerned. Well, at least one neighbor is concerned. The other neighbor doesn't want to give no two shits about her. This very angry woman who in the height of the pandemic, doesn't want to wear a mask or any of that stuff. She calls her old college friend, Monique, and basically begs her to come and help her, stay with her for a little bit. And Monique goes against the wishes of her father and brother and decides, I'm going to, repay a debt to my friend. I'm going to go stay with her. She lives in Queens. And we find out that Mavis believes that she is being haunted by this figure of a plague doctor who appears in her dreams nightly and threatens to effectively erase her from existence. Just take her, and by taking her, take all the memories of her and almost erase her to a point where anyone who once knew her or met her wouldn't even know her anymore. And there's this idea of like the horror of erasing your existence, which is truly a terrifying idea, especially, as you get older and as you think about like the mark you want to leave on the world. The idea of not only leaving no mark, but having where nobody even has a memory that you existed. That's fairly terrifying. That's like a genuinely scary idea to think about. Along with that, she tells Monique that every night she has these incredibly lucid dreams where she is effectively haunted, almost Nightmare on Elm Street style, by this dream monster in the shape of a plague doctor. And we see these images throughout the movie. Monique decides to stay with her for a few days, and suddenly Monique's dreams start to be affected by this plague doctor as well. I don't want to spoil too much. I really think this is a movie that people should seek out, people should see. I think the more people who see this, the more this movie might start to appear on year-end lists of the top 10, maybe top 15 horror movies. And I only say that because this has been such a ridiculously stacked year for horror. Like, one of the best years for horror in the last decade to maybe even 20 years. I don't want to spoil all the twists and turns, but this movie has a few legitimately great jump scares. This movie utilizes the concept of the dream sequence as good or better than any movie I can think of. There's a lot of times where, you'll watch a horror movie and there's that awful cliche of something scary happens and, oh, it was just a dream. And then the person wakes up and, surprise, that was just a dream. And it's, that's a cliche. This movie utilizes that idea, but it works because that's actually what the movie is about. It's about characters that are being haunted in their dreams by this killer presence, or this, not even a killer presence, but this haunting presence that is threatening them. And, there's this great sequence in the movie where Mavis asks Mo, you might think I'm crazy, and, you might tell me, if I asked you for help, you would tell me that I need to see somebody, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a doctor. If you believed me, what would you tell me to do? And it leads to them, pursuing answers to this question and like posting things on Reddit and seeking out demonologists. And there's some really cool touches. And again, because of the pandemic, there's some like really cool ideas where they contact people through video chats, and the person's kids are in the background making noise because that's what life was during the pandemic. We're still in it to a degree, but when the pandemic first started and everybody was working remotely, your kids would be, you know, running around in the background while you're trying to have a serious conversation with people on the other side of a video chat. Again, I don't want to spoil the twists and the turns that happen in the late second and third act of this movie, but it's less than 90 minutes long, and I cannot recommend this movie enough. I think this is a genuinely great little horror movie that is, at least for me, in the conversation for my top 10 list of 2022. Again, if it doesn't make the top 10 list, it is not for any fault of this movie. It is the fault of the ridiculously stacked 2022 year in horror that we have had. Most people, you know, I watched a Watch Mojo video the other day of the top 20 horror movies of the year, and I was in awe of, like, oh my God, like, they have a top 20 and it's barely December, and there's still more movies that I have to watch. So I'm really glad I got to check out The Harbinger. I really hope you guys check out The Harbinger. It's available right now on VOD to rent and to buy. I got it, you can get it on Vudu. I think you could rent it for about $6. And let me tell you, if you're as old as I am, you remember going to the video store and renting movies for about $5 a pop at Blockbuster. Yeah, this is probably worth it because I enjoyed the hell out of it. It's definitely the type of movie I feel can be watched and rewatched. And like I said, I'd love to sit down and talk with writer-director Andy Mitton and, you know, talk about Binghamton and why, if he has personal connections there, and, you know, discuss his horror catalog, because I really enjoyed Witch in the Window. I really enjoyed The Harbinger, and now I'm going to go back and watch Yellow Brick Road too. So, yeah, this has been Danny, not the Plague Doctor, from the Lassercast. Go check out The Harbinger on Vudu, and I'll talk to you very soon.